Hi, everybody. I think we're live. Once again, new week, new Facebook Live. We're having, it's a different week, so we're having different technical issues this week. But anyway, I think we're live now. This is Chris Hinds, Denver City Council, District 10, or Denver's Perfect 10, as I like to say. And we're here live streaming once again. And I want to thank you all for coming out, participating. And by coming out, I mean this is allowing you to participate without even putting on pants. So one of the things that I really I thought was important in my campaign was accountability and transparency. And so we've, in the District 10 office, we've tried to make ourselves available at R&O meetings, at community meetings in the district and around the city. We've put on coffee meetings, we've put on happy hour meetings, and and engaged introduced and engaged the public, and hope that we get to see you again at some point in the near future. But this is important to me personally because by this I mean Facebook Live. This is important to me because we all deserve access to our elected officials, and for those who have difficulty getting out, or for those who choose not to get out, this is a way for you to interact directly with your city council person and be able to do that without having to leave your home. So again, Chris Hinds, Denver City Council's District 10. Let's talk about the week. So as I had mentioned, in addition to accountability and transparency, I talked a lot about housing, transportation, and representation, as in we all need access. We all need access to housing. We all need access to transportation. We all need access to representation. So we have, in our refinement of Facebook Live, we've organized all of our topics along those lines. And sorry, I want to say one other thing. The part of the reason why we're doing this live as opposed to pre-recorded is, and if we do it live, we make more mistakes and we say more ums, but the reason why we do it live is so that you can ask questions. So please do ask questions, put them in the comments, and we'll see them live, and hopefully we'll even answer them live. So there you go. So let's talk about housing. In the last week in Biz Committee, we talked about workforce development. We only had one action item, and the action item took an hour and a half. There's a lot to cover about workforce development. And so what does that have to do with housing? Well, first of all, workforce development it spans the gamut of different kinds of jobs, but here in the city of Denver, we have a shortage of construction jobs. We've got a lot of demand for housing. We want to, as a city, put in more affordable housing, and the Denver Workforce Development Group says we will be short 100,000 construction workers, and I don't remember the time frame. I think it's by 2035 or 2030, something like that. I got to look that up, but to make a long story short, we are definitely short construction workers, trained construction workers, and that's impacting our ability to make sure that we have affordable housing for everyone. So it was a really interesting conversation. It was a lively conversation. Another thing that the workforce development people shared with us is that within 6 months after completing the program, those who went through Denver's workforce development, 87% of them got jobs. So really nice, compelling numbers, and people had got significantly more pay as well. And so how does that relate to housing? Well, it doesn't take an MBA in finance to know that when your income is lower than your expenses, that's bad. And when your income's lower than your expenses, then it's typical for you to afford anything, including the basic necessities like housing. So the more income we give our people here in Denver, the better off they are as far as being able to afford housing and food and shelter and putting clothes on your feet, and frankly, as we get more we get people with more livable wage jobs. That also means that they will spend money. We, as in a city, we will spend money, and our local businesses. So we'll continue to be an even stronger economic engine when we can afford to eat out and those sorts of things. So another thing in the last week, as far as housing is concerned, there is a senior housing development that is going into Capitol Hill. It's at 14th and ... I think it's Lafayette. Do you guys know where are we not on? We are on, okay. Do you know where the senior housing is? 14th and Franklin? No, it's not 14th and Franklin.
No, it's further
west. So we'll get back to you on that, unless, certainly we're putting in a new senior housing development in Capitol Hill. I believe it's along 14th on the west side of Capitol Hill. So the next thing, let's chat a bit about accessory dwelling units, or granny flats, or I forget some of the other names for it, but what's that?
Mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law, sweet. Yes, you wouldn't put your own mother there, but the mother-in-law. So anyway, with ADUs, there is accessory dwelling units has been a little bit more of a topic lately in city council, because we have a lot of people moving to the city and we don't have a place to put them. So we also, as we grow as a city, we also want to preserve things like the charm, the historic character of each neighborhood and of each historic district, and so as we continue to grow as a city, right now 67% of Denver lives in single-family housing, and for the vast majority of the remainder, they're in large high-rise apartments or condominium developments. So basically we have single-family homes, and then we've got these huge high-rises. And I mean, I guess I say huge. I live in one of those, but there is the idea of a missing middle, as in how can we continue to get denser as a city? How can we accommodate people who are moving here? And how can we make sure that our homes are still affordable for people who have lived here for a while? One of the topics of conversation is accessory dwelling units, and so that's kind of an example of that is taking your garage and adding a studio on top of the garage. So that's one way to grow a bit as a city, but not destroy homes or scrape them and start over. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. If you live in District 10, I'm particularly interested in what your thoughts are about accessory dwelling units. And if you have broader thoughts or questions or comments about how we can address the missing middle. I mean, we're doing pretty good as a city putting in single-family homes. We're doing pretty good as a city putting in large-scale apartments, particularly right now in Golden Triangle. But how can we do something that's between the two of them, so that we can preserve some of our neighborhood character, preserve our historic structures, and continue to grow as a city. The one thing that I would also say is, as we grow and as we get more people living on a block, in addition to all of that housing, we have to address our transit infrastructure too. And hopefully you've noticed that in my less than 5 months in office, I've been talking a lot about transit infrastructure. The last 2 weeks, I've been in the news 6 times that we know of, at least, about Denver's approach to snow abatement. As in, there's snow. We didn't notice that. So it was frustrating for a lot of you, and certainly frustrating for me as well, that we had a lot of snow on the ground that didn't seem to get shoveled or plowed, and so I'm pleased to learn that actually community planning and development, once I started showing up on the news, I learned actually just yesterday morning that they deputized a whole bunch of CPD folks who aren't normally tasked with inspecting sidewalks, and they got 30 people together, and they all went out and started inspecting the 1,437 reports that you and many others submitted to 311 about people who weren't shoveling their snow. So looks like we're going to expect some more snow this weekend. I think it's currently forecast on Sunday, so I'm interested to see what Denver's approach is on Sunday. So we'll find out soon. Hopefully it will be more proactive. I'm looking forward to that. I want to make sure that we all have the freedom to get from A to B safely. Let's see. Next, let's talk about transportation. We on yesterday morning, man, time flies. I must be having too much fun. So the day before today, it feels like so long ago, Transportation Solutions had their annual meeting. And if you're not familiar with Transportation Solutions, they are a TMA, Transportation Management Association area. Man, I should know what that is. They're a TMA, which is not TMI. In fact, I need more information about that to know what the. But basically, what they do is they pick an area of the city, or they have an area of the city, and they identify ways for people to get around that particularly they focus on non-car ways to get people around. So they work with RTD, they work with making sure that our sidewalks are traversable. But so anyway, they had their annual meeting yesterday morning, and they honored Nick Lemasters. Nick Lemasters was with the Taubman, who runs Cherry Creek Mall, and he recently, just in the last couple months, moved from Cherry Creek Mall to running the Cherry Creek North Business Improvement District. So he has a lot of experience with Cherry Creek, a lot of experience with businesses in Cherry Creek, and I'm really excited to see what leadership he brings to Cherry Creek North, and I've had more than one conversation about transit infrastructure in Cherry Creek North. Nick and I talked specifically about First Avenue there in Cherry Creek, and we want to make sure that people can get around the whole city, but particularly can get around First. And for some people, First is a barrier. They can't get from one side of the street to the other safely, or they don't feel they can. And well, they can't. It's not just a feeling; it's a reality. So we're working on coming up with ways that we can improve transit infrastructure, including in Cherry Creek. We also last night, which was also yesterday, we went to the BRT task force meeting, and turns out that not everyone knew about the BRT task force meeting. So when I posted it online on Facebook, it appears that there might be a little bit of a disconnect between who knew about the meeting and who didn't. So we're working on that now. The result of the meeting, though, is we learned that the BRT planning process is still moving forward. It's moving forward slowly, but hey, we're government. We move at the fast pace of local government. But since Colfax is a state highway, we also have to rely on the state, and because we're getting federal funds, we have to rely on the feds as well. So there are a lot of moving parts, all government related, and so last night's meeting involved the 4 business improvement districts that are along Colfax that would be affected by the BRT, and there were a couple RNOs there as well. So I'm really interested in seeing how that plays out. Immediately after leaving there, I went to the Metro Mayor's Caucus and Metro Mayor/Commissioner Caucus. And 99% of the time I talk about how I'm a council person on Denver City Council. Well, since we're the city and county of Denver, excuse me, since we're the city and county of Denver, I am also a county commissioner. So we went to the Botanic Gardens last night, and we talked to a lot of other county commissioners and mayors in the metro area. And so Mike Kaufman was there, the new mayor of Aurora. I did touch base with him briefly about the Colfax BRT, and hopefully we can have more conversations to talk about how, what makes sense, how important BRT is to the city of Aurora and to the metro area. And I think that BRT would be far greater if it made it all the way to the Anschutz campus. There are a lot of people who go from National Jewish to Anschutz and back, or Denver Health to Anschutz and back, or the Auraria campus. There are a lot of people who are at both campuses, Anschutz and Auraria, and it would be awesome for us to have a way for people to get quickly from one place to another without having to drive. Let's see. Oh, okay. So the next thing is we have been talking about, so I mentioned that that Community Planning and Development deputized a bunch of their employees for snow shoveling inspection. So I want to pose a question to you. What do you think about deputizing, like say, people who are in the business improvement districts? Do you think that giving business improvement district employees the power to inspect snow on sidewalks, do you think that that would be useful? Do you think that that's an overreach of power? Certainly we've got to do something more to make sure that we have the freedom to get from A to B even after it snows. And so we're trying to think of other ways that are beyond what we do here in the city today. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are, and if you have other suggestions, we're interested in that as well. So speaking of other suggestions, a couple of the other things that we've heard is create a fund so that the city shovels the snow from a city perspective. I'm not sure exactly what that looks like. We've heard another suggestion of like Uber and Lyft, how you can crowdsource transit from A to B. What about using a crowdsource type app that where you could offer to shovel snow and other people could offer to pay to have their snow shoveled? So that's another option. We thought of. I think you've, as a community, you've given us one or two other options. They're not coming to my. I'm not immediately remembering them. Do you have one?
Increasing the.
Oh. You mean fines? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So another thing that that we've heard from a few people is there are some repeat offenders out there, and we talked to Public Works last Friday, and one of the things that they said is every time there's a snow, the counter starts over, as in let's say it snows on Monday, and you report your neighbor's sidewalk as unshoveled, and then they come out and inspect, they get a warning, and then if they inspect again, then the inspector may issue a warning or may issue a fine. But if it snows, so that was on Monday, if it snows again on Thursday, Public Works says the counter resets, and then you get a warning again. And this is actually in Channel 9. Marshall Zellinger was the reporter. It was on Hey Next with Kyle Clark, and they had said that it was a little counterintuitive that the counter would reset, and I would agree with that. Also talked with, at the Transportation Solutions meeting, I talked with Chris Nevitt, who's the mayor's or the city's transit-oriented development person, and he said that CPD is maintaining a list of habitual offenders. So if that is actually the case, then maybe it makes sense for us to use that list and stop giving warnings every time and actually start finding people. So I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I think as a community, the outpouring of support that we've received is more supportive of issuing fines than issuing more warnings. But if you think otherwise, then I certainly would like to hear your thoughts as well. Another thing that I mentioned on that same article on Channel 9 was it is interesting that all of our guiding documents, say Blueprint, Comp Plan 2040, they all talk about how we should prioritize pedestrian transit over all other forms of transit. Yet we're giving a lot of warnings to the people who aren't shoveling their snow, and meanwhile we're issuing a lot of citations to people who are parking. So it is almost as if our documents that we've adopted, our words that are on paper, are not the same as our actions. So I've asked Public Works, actually I asked them on Monday to get us a list or a count of the number of parking citations that were issued in the last 2 weeks, or the 2 weeks after the last snowstorm, because we know that according to that Channel 9 report, 1,436, more than 1,400 reports of addresses were sent into 311, and only 34 citations were issued. So less than 2%. So I'm curious, and I haven't received this from Public Works yet, but I'm curious, of those 36 or 34 citations, snow shoveling citations, how many parking citations were issued? And so if we're really prioritizing pedestrian transit over car transit, maybe we should be enforcing our snow abatement as much or more than we're enforcing our parking. So we'll find out, hopefully. I did send Public Works. I talked with Public Works yesterday asking for a follow-up, and then I emailed them again asking them for a follow-up. Another thing that we learned is that Community Planning and Development does our neighborhood inspection services, which I didn't know, and actually our Public Works person didn't tell me. So our legislative liaison, I was beating him up about the lack of snow shoveling, and he didn't tell me that it was actually Community Planning and Development that does the neighborhood inspection. But that actually creates another question in my head: is like, if we have Public Works doing some of it and Community Planning and Development doing some of it, I hope that there's enough communication between the two, because that could government already has a fair amount of bureaucracy anyway, but then when we add different agencies, I just want to make sure that we're being efficient, and maybe it makes sense for us to take another look at the way our right-of-way is being built, maintained, and enforced. So that's pretty early in the thought process, but maybe you have thoughts too. So again, love to hear your thoughts. Okay, so conveyance. So the District 10 office just came back from the Denver Fire Department holiday lunch, and that reminded us to talk about conveyance. So conveyance is I guess a more technical term, and that conveyance devices are escalators, moving walkways, and elevators. And boy, District 10 sure has a lot of elevators, because we've got Uptown, Cap Hill, Golden Triangle, Cheeseman, and Congress, and I don't know, a lot of the buildings in those neighborhoods are multifamily units. So as we continue to grow as a city, as we continue to put in more high-rise buildings as a city, it is shocking to me to hear that our fire department rescues an average of 8 people out of elevators every day. So we're working on a code amendment that would ask our elevator companies to be more responsive. So when someone gets stuck in an elevator 8 times a day, the new code requests the elevator companies to come out in an hour, or at least establish contact with the fire department. I'm actually a little concerned that established contact with the fire department isn't enough. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that too. Should we require the elevator companies to come out? Have you had issues with elevators? I know we've gotten a lot of concerns from you via email and phone, but here's an opportunity for you to provide feedback in a different way too. So upcoming events, and we've only got a couple minutes left. We're having a listening session next Tuesday night, December 17th from 5:30 to 7 at the library, the central branch of the library. We'd love to have you there. Love to hear your thoughts about what qualities make a good sheriff. And we're also going to talk about whether the sheriff should be elected or appointed. So 5:30 to 7, Tuesday, December 17th at the Central Library. Congress Park Neighbors is having their annual meeting Wednesday, December 18th at the Sewell School at 6 p.m. And the Congress Park Pool focus meetings are Wednesday and Thursday, 5:30 to 6:30 at Carla Madison. So if you're interested in the Congress Park Pool, please come on out. And the last thing that I'll say, and this is about transportation and sidewalks, we had someone come out, or someone email us this week and said, hey, there was a pothole, and less than 72 hours later it was fixed. Again, if we're prioritizing pedestrian transit over all other forms of transit, I've heard several times that potholes are getting fixed within 72 hours. Meanwhile, we have sidewalks that haven't been fixed in 72 years. So that's something else that we're thinking about, that we've got in our head, and we're deciding what to do with here in the District 10 office. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully we're a little more organized this week. We will never be totally tight. Really the main goal of this is to be accessible to you. It's not to give you a nice, smooth news report. We will never be Kyle Clark or any of the anchors here in the metro area. And I mean, they get paid good money for what they do, and our focus is a little bit different. So thank you for tuning in, and have a wonderful weekend.